the last few weeks and months, we've been watching scenes of war and destructions from the comfort of our own homes. But for those living in places like Ukraine, Gaza, Lebanon, and Iran, this is not distant news. It is daily reality. It is chaos, devastations, and death. It is families fleeing from desperations, leaving behind homes and communities, seeking shelter wherever they can find. Unsure if the violence will ever end, if there will be anything left to return to. For many, the life they once knew is already gone. Hope feels shattered. I was born during the chaos of war. I was born when my mother and her whole village were sheltering in a safe zone, while America dropped B-52 over our land and spray Agent Orange over our fields. And children still born today suffering from its causes. I was born to the sound of war, of fear, and of grief. I grew up not with lullabies, but traumatic stories told and retold by people gathering in the fields, clearing out the land of debris of war, and rebuilding homes and making burial sites. These stories became sound wave that flows in my nerves and vibrates my bones. This passage of Isaiah that we have heard today is one of the most beloved poetry in the Hebrew Bible, because it is a poetry, a song of suffering and vulnerability that resonates with those living in exile, with deep trauma in their soul and spirit. A song of hope when all hope have been shattered. A song of suffering which God forms to healing and transform to wholeness. We usually read this song as a song of a prophet about a suffering servant of God who suffer alongside them. But it's also a song about Israel and their suffering and sorrow, their grief, and their loss of all hope, living no longer as Israel with their temple, with their land. But it's also a song about God who comes to them in their suffering and restores and redeems. I read this song as seeing the nature of who God is, who comes and puts God's arms around people and walks with them in their deepest grief, sharing the weight of their weaknesses, their failings, even their shame, particularly when the people have not listened, when the people have rejected the wisdom of God. The suffering servant had warned them, but they rejected his warning. He had called them to put their trust in God and not on military might, but they struck him down. He pleaded for them to listen, but they pierced him and crushed him. And when he cried out, all the more, but they struck him down and condemned him to death. A servant of God accompanying God's people, even in the mess that they have made, and restoring their dignity and humanity, even when they robbed him of his. And now he is suffering with them for the consequences of their stubbornness and rebellious way. And he will die and be buried alongside them in exile. This servant embodied what God is like. In my teens, I was in deep sadness of the separation and the loss of my grandmother and being far from my homeland that I knew. And the trauma of being caught in a boat in a storm at sea with death staring all in our faces. And then being captured by pirates who torment us day and night. All this trauma surfaced in my teens. And I didn't have the wisdom to understand of trauma. I just hated who I was and what I was experiencing. In high school, I was called different names. Nip, Ching Chong. I was told to go back to where I came from. And I was bullied and beaten simply because I was different. But on the loneliest of night, this suffering servant came to me and put his arms around me and held on to me until all my grief, all my pain poured out. And he held me throughout the night until all my sorrow flowed out with my tears. I came to know him as Jesus, who is the wounded healer, who knows my trauma and my pain, and who stitched up my wounded heart with his nail-scarred hands. This Jewish rabbi who was despised, rejected, assured me that I'm not alone, no matter how others might treat me. The beloved of God affirms me that I am beloved of God. This Messiah who chose to suffer and die opened my eyes to see that God is forming my suffering, my endurance with pain, my liminal reality to display God's splendor. And he gave me a vision of the horizons when the trumpet sounds, that I too will see fully the glory of God, and the glory of God reflected in me. And often I say, how can that be? Because I too have spoken harshly towards others. I too have despised and rejected others. I too have bruised and struck others with my words and actions. But he says to me, they are nailed on the cross. I have carried your sin. I have carried your shame and guilt. You are my beloved, and you are free. And he invites me to walk with him in a way of reconciling others and the world. If your life feels like Fridays and Sunday never seems to come, if pain, illness, brokenness, vulnerability are your daily reality, if you walk through your days feeling alone, without joy, without hope, if the promise of Sunday seems distant and almost out of reach, if you feel rejected and despised, and if your spirit has been crushed and your heart pierced, if trauma runs through your nerves and shakes your very bone, you are not alone. You are not alone. The God of creation is with you and knows your reality, knows your pain. The Creator God who spoke all things into being is acquainted with your pain and your sorrow. The Spirit who hovers over the waters of creation breathes lives even now, washing over your grief with gentle mercy. The one with the nail-scarred hand draws you near and embraces you, walking beside you, bearing the weight you cannot carry on your own. His broken body, his body was broken so that we may know the extent of God's love. His blood poured out on the cross, blood that once cleansed the temple, and the people of old cleanses our shame, guilt, and sin. His blood poured out is also the source of life that is given every time we participate in communion. You are not alone. You are loved by God. And you are forgiven and free. Sunday is coming. The healing of the nation is coming. The glory and beauty of creations will be restored. The dawn of God's splendor is on the horizon. But for now, we wait with the Spirit. For now, we carry each other's burden, knowing that Christ carries ours. For now, we cling to Christ through the dark days and the long night. We eat the bread that gives life and drinking the source of life that keeps us for life eternal. You are not alone. You are loved by God. You are forgiven and free. And we will see the rising of the sun. So keep walking through the darkness, through death, with the suffering servant of Jesus. Amen.